Hello everyone, my name is Kenton Kivestu. I'm an ex-Googler, an ex-BCG consultant, and the founder of RocketBlocks, an online platform that helps candidates prepare for interviews. Today we're going to talk about the Big Mac test. This is a simple test that you can use to evaluate whether your structure to a particular case interview prompt that you receive is a good structure or not. This is a topic that a lot of candidates really struggle with, especially when they're first starting to prep for interviews. There's a lot of advice out there about like make sure your structure is MECE, or here's some CAN frameworks you can use, all this stuff. But at the end of the day, you want to be able to build really good structures on the fly. And so if you are aiming to do that, you need a good way to evaluate what is a good structure. And the Big Mac test is a really simple way to do that. So let's talk about what is the test and then use it on a couple of examples. Let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, so what exactly is the Big Mac test? Well, the good news is it's really simple. It's just 3 questions. Those questions are, is it MECE? Is it applicable? And is it customized? Hence the Big Mac. M for MECE, A for applicable, C for customized. That's it. Those are the 3 checkboxes you want to hit for building a great structure. So let's talk a little bit about what each of those means. M stands for MECE, which means mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. So I apologize, we've got an acronym buried in an acronym here, MAC and then MECE, but it is a critical step. And MECE basically is a way of solving problems where you break a problem down into independent buckets, and that set of buckets will give you a collective view of what's driving the problem. If this concept is brand new to you, we've got a YouTube video deep diving on this specific concept, so I'd recommend pausing here, checking out that video, and then coming back to this. But the first question is my framework MECE? The second is it applicable? A framework can be MECE without being directly applicable to the problem at hand. And you want to make sure that you've hit both those first 2 boxes, of course. And then the last is it customized? Is the framework and structure that you're putting forth for the question customized to the information that's been provided to you in the case prompt from the interviewer, to the additional information you pulled in from your clarifying questions, as well as any outside and relevant knowledge you're bringing to bear on that industry or the particular type of problem they're having. And you want to show that you are folding that information in and really customizing your structure to the nuances of the particular question that has been presented to you. So if you hit those 3 checkboxes, you're going to pass the Big Mac test. It's MECE, it's applicable, and it's customized to the particular case interview question you're trying to solve. Now let's take this test and apply it in a few examples to really bring this to life and show you how it works. Great, now let's run through a couple of examples. Let's say you get an M&A case question. It doesn't really matter the details of the question in this case, but let's say it's something like company X wants to buy company Y, which is in a different industry than they operate in. Okay, great. And you say, well, to analyze this question, I'm going to use a profitability framework to understand how profitable this target company is that they want to acquire. And to do that, I'm going to look at revenue and cost. Those are my top level buckets. And then I'm going to look at, price and quantity and revenue and variable and fixed costs and costs, etc. Okay, great. So that's the framework you proposed. Now let's apply the Big Mac test to it. Well, first, is it MECE? The good news is you passed the first part of the test. That framework is MECE. You've got profitability equals revenue minus cost. It checks that box. You're going to be able to figure out if a company's profitable. However, let's move on to the second step, which is it applicable? In this case, it's not quite applicable to the particular question we've got. Yes, profitability of the target company may be something that the acquirer is really interested in, but there's going to be a whole host of other things. And so the applicability of this framework to the particular question at hand doesn't meet the bar. It's not applicable. So we don't even need to go to the third step of the test in this case. Okay, so that's example 1. Now let's look at another example which does slightly better. Let's imagine you get a standard profitability question. Again, the details and contours of the question don't matter here, but imagine the question is like, company Y is struggling with falling profitability. How would you go ahead and address this problem? And then you come back with the same profitability framework. You say, well, to analyze this problem, what I want to look at is revenue, and I want to look at cost because revenue minus cost equals profitability. And in the revenue bucket, I'll look at price and quantity, and cost, I'll look at variable and fixed costs, etc. Okay, great. Now let's apply the Big Mac test to that framework for this particular problem. Well, is it MECE? Yeah, it is MECE. It's the same framework we were talking about earlier. It passes that test with flying colors. Great. Now, the second part, is it applicable? Well, in this question, the core issue we are trying to solve for is profitability. Why is profitability declining at this company? So this framework is directly applicable in that case. Great, it checks that box. Now, let's look at the third box. Is it customized? Well, the answer here is no. I basically just rattled off the standard profitability framework. I didn't change anything. I said variable, fixed cost, price, quantity, etc. It's something you can get directly out of a book. I haven't really brought in any nuance or anything like that. So it does pass the first two questions, MECE and applicable, but it fails on customized. Now let's consider a final example. Imagine the case question we get is your client is a North American airliner that is struggling with declining profitability. They've hired our firm to help them identify and address that issue. Great. Now let's imagine that the structure I propose is, well, to look into this, I want to look at revenue and costs. And within the revenue bucket, I want to break things into the business and personal and leisure travel lines that I'm sure they have. So we'll look at both the quantities and the quantities and the prices for each of those lines and see how they've shifted around. And then the other thing I want to look at on the revenue side is credit card programs. I know that a lot of airlines have used credit card programs successfully as revenue drivers and profit drivers. So I think we should look into that as well as any other possible revenue streams that this particular airline may have that I'm not aware of. On the cost side, there's obviously fixed and variable costs. On the fixed side, there's going to be some big buckets that we're going to want to look into. The capital costs of like the planes themselves, the operations around the world, facilities, things like that, airport contracts. And then on the variable side, there's things like labor to support all the operations, as well as a big item such as gasoline, which has been highly volatile lately. Okay, so let's pause there. Let's say that's the structure that's been laid out. Now let's apply the Big Mac test. So first, is it MECE? Yes. We've established that this framework is MECE. It's the core profitability framework, some iterations on it, so it passes that. Is it applicable? Also yes. This is a question about declining profitability. This framework is squarely directed at addressing what is going on with profitability, so it's great there. And then the third one, customize. Does it pass that test? Yes, this is not just the standard profitability framework. It's gone well beyond that, breaking revenue down into business versus personal, and the airlines thinking about that. It rolls in some aspects about credit cards and other revenue streams that they may have. So it really shows that the candidate is thinking in detail about the specifics that have been provided. And same thing on the cost structure, calling out some of the big items that might be there, and highlighting some really nice topical stuff like, hey, gasoline prices have been volatile. So that does a really good job. It checks all three boxes. And as a candidate, you would be off to a great start with that structure. One final thing to note about the Big Mac test. It's really useful because it helps you pinpoint where you may be struggling to build successful structures. There's often a couple of key failure modes that candidates that are new to the case interview process get stuck in. Either they're using super canned MECE frameworks that they've memorized, and so they hit that box, but they're not applicable, or they're not customized, or they're on the flip side of the spectrum where their frameworks are super customized, directly pulling in a lot of information to the question, but it's all sort of tangled and overlapping and it's not quite MECE. So the Big Mac test is a really good way to understand where you're succeeding, where you're falling short, and then work on improving from there. Thanks again for watching. We've got a ton of great content coming out on the RocketBlocks channel on a weekly basis. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so below. You'll get all our great content as soon as it comes out. And thanks again for watching. Have a good day.